big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Just under 24 hours until the Bears schedule comes out for the 2025 season. There's a lot of really interesting statistics and numbers driving the wide receiver room. And then on top of that, we got to talk about NFC North defenses. Welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's under Nick Whalen. You can check us out on Twitter @_Nick Whalen, @Usayd Koshul, and @Halas Beat. Nick, I know the pre-show conversations we have are always probably the most interesting. I like to say that this is an edition of the Halas Beat After Dark because we never record close to 9 o'clock at night. This is usually right around the time where I am watching some sort of TV show, and you're probably spending time with the wife. But what's up, man?
Yeah, you have it exactly right. It depends on how late it is, depending on if it's like a show you have to pay attention to or one that's just like white noise. But that's definitely our evenings, as well as watching and playing with all four of our dogs because we're watching the one right now. So yeah, man. I mean, it's the eve of the schedule, which is exciting, I think. And we'll get into some of that stuff. I tend to not like going to games because I feel like I can watch and observe more and not, again, this is just me trying to be like, I don't know. I know you don't like me references, but like the older I get, the more I'm just like, I don't like big crowds. I don't like being around a bunch of people. So I like watching from the comfort of my home. But I know some people get really excited about like planning trips and stuff like that. And that I get, with family members or whatever. But I don't know. I don't get super hyped about the schedule. Do you?
I mean, I get excited to see the schedule release videos that these teams do, but for me, this is kind of the schedule release to me is sort of like the day where I sit down and I look at this thing and I'm like, all right, let me lay out my entire schedule for the fall between my season plus what the Bears are doing, plus what this thing is going to look like in terms of what games I might go to at Soldier Field in September and October versus November and December, which, again, I will say it sounds like from the two games we have so far that, and again, we'll get into this later, the Bears are definitely going to have a more interesting backloaded than front-loaded schedule.
100%. That's what it looks like. So that'll be interesting. But the first thing we got to talk about, y'all, is Usayd brought this up. He tweeted this out today. Interesting. And we know that the Bears have, Luther Burden, just drafted him. And then you got Rome Odunze last year, 9th pick. And, they're on the rookie contracts. They're cheap. But Warren Sharp put something out in terms of the most expensive wide receiver rooms, again, just for this year. The Bears ranked 6th, which I was a little surprised by because we've only paid one guy. Like the top team is Cincy. That makes sense. They just paid 2 guys a ton of money. But the Bears being 6th, obviously really heavy with DJ Moore, was surprising to me. Was that surprising to you?
Yes and no. I would say, if I had to pick between two, I would say it's not really surprising because DJ Moore's extension, first off, last year he was just making $7.2 million. So it's kind of one of those things where it was in the context of a wide receiver one. The Bears were basically paying him freaking chump change is all it really was. And this is, I believe, DJ Moore's 3rd contract because he had the rookie contract with the Panthers, got the extension, got traded. Now he does ultimately get that 3rd contract. Now he'll be 32 by the time that this contract is up realistically, if he ends up being on the roster for so long. The big thing, though, is this is a pretty team-friendly deal here, but he's making $24.9 million this season alone, which, again, comes out to about 8.8% of the Bears' salary cap. This is, to me, one of those big situations where I'm not surprised with it at all because Zacchaeus is on a 1-year deal, I believe, right?
Yeah, 1.5.
Yeah, $1.5 million deal. Devin Duvernay is obviously a 1-year deal as well, I believe. So it's really a situation to where I'm like, I'm not surprised that all this is the case. But I also think that the other thing we have to factor into this whole thing is that $36.8 million figure that was referenced on Twitter It is also including Tyler Scott, who shockingly, the Bears have 3 wide receivers on rookie deals. Now, that 36.8 that we see, I am also going to note this. This includes the guys like Miles Boykin and John Jackson and Samori Toure and Jade Walker, Maurice Alexander. So this is pretty much a culmination of all those guys. Now, obviously, the Bears aren't going to carry, I believe, the 10 receivers that they have. They carry 5. That number, to me, they should be able to trim down to about 30 million-ish, let's say, that roughly, I guess.
Yeah, well, the number, actually, you're off. The number it says is 38.7. But, yeah, it'll come down for sure. Because, I mean, the vet minimum, I think, is near, a veteran minimum is near $1 million. So, and the rookie minimum is a lot lower than that. I do think we could take a little time, man, because this has come up a bunch. But DJ Moore, they're going to trade him. I think it's something that we could talk about for a minute or two. So I brought up his contract. And again, he just signed it. As Usayd said, like, it jumps up a lot in terms of the cap hit this year. And then the dead cap. So realistically, it looks like he is for sure going to be a Chicago Bear 2025, 2026 at a minimum, in my opinion, because after 2026, they could release him and it's only $8 million in dead cap and they would save 24.5. Now, again, some of that is how are you performing, right? Some guys stay, he'll be 30 years old at that time. Now, the tricky thing you said is people are talking about if you trade him after June 1st, you would save, like, let's say next year they trade him after June 1st. You'd save $24.5 million, and it would be $12 million in dead cap split over 2 years. That seems like a lot to me. I don't know. I guess it depends on how Luther Burden and Rome Odunze develop. But to me, I think that they're going to have this trio of receivers for the next 2 years, and then we'll see what happens. Because also, what if Rome Odunze doesn't develop, y'all? You probably want to keep DJ Moore. What if Luther Burden doesn't develop? You probably want to keep DJ Moore. So, like, to me, I think part of it is the development of the 2 young guys and to see how all 3 of them absorb and develop with Ben Johnson's offense and with Antoine Randall.
And again, that's something that we talked about in our episode from yesterday, basically saying that the biggest positive of this coaching staff is that this coaching staff does not care who you are. You are not guaranteed a roster spot by any means. But coming back to the receiver room here, this $38.7 million. So this speaks to me, no one, because it's a massive number. Like, that's 6th highest in the league. I mean, the reason it is so significant is because we're talking about a franchise that has, and again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm using air quotes, but we're talking about a franchise that has invested in the in the wide receiver position. Like, they've invested in the receiver position over the last couple of years by trying to go ahead and trying to supposedly say that they've stacked the deck with playmakers, but they really haven't. Like, you look back at it, and the history of this team operating in free agency at the receiver position is honestly atrocious, right? You had guys like Marcus Wheaton, who had good years in Pittsburgh but fell off the face of the earth. Then you had Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel. Obviously, people were super excited for that, but
you can't forget about the Kendall Wright year. Remember when he was the wide receiver 1?
Exactly, yeah. So the Kendall Wright year, the year that everyone thought that the Bears were going to trade for Jarvis Landry, which there was some truth to that, by the way. I learned about 8-9 years ago at this point, just dropping that tidbit right now. But they ended up trading for Dontrell Inman at the trade deadline, 7th round pick, obviously.
Nailed it.
And then you start to go ahead and look at, like, Cordero Patterson they brought in as a gadget guy. You know, they drafted Darnell Mooney, I get it. They drafted guys like Velus Jones. And again, I really love Tyler Scott. I hope that there is a roster spot for him, even as a specials teamer. So this is a franchise that they've never really had success in terms of drafting and developing receivers. They've made these ill-fated attempts to kind of try and invest in the wide receiver position, but it ultimately has never succeeded because there's a really interesting trend, I think, around the league that has to be examined. If we start to look at some of the top pass catchers from each generation, I would say let's look at Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson as two of the ones that have kind of played in the league over the last, whatever, let's just say 2 to 3 decades. So Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson, I'll throw in Roddy White plus Julio Jones. I will throw in Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson as kind of the new age guys. Teams that invest in wide receiver are the ones that draft and develop those guys. Very rarely is there this like star receiver that tends to hit the market. A team picks him up, and then what happens is A, the guy performs at a high level and continues being a superstar, or B, what happens is that the mediocre player, a guy that's mediocre or second, third string guy automatically becomes a first string wide receiver. And I think, two other receivers there to throw in the ring with a lot of the guys I mentioned, AJ Green, Julio Jones, right? Two highly successful players that were drafted and developed by their respective organizations.
Well, but most of them are top 10 picks. And that's things like, besides Justin Jefferson's the outlier, but they're top 10 picks. You invest, you develop, and guys get there. And that's the thing is, don't be like some Bears fans, the Rome Odunze stuff, take a breather, okay? Most top 10 pick receivers have a pretty good impact. And considering the offense last year with 3 offensive coordinators, I thought he did okay. And one thing that was interesting I've noticed with Rome Odunze is both Packer games, the Viking game, and there might be another one, Caleb looked to Rome on 4th down or a gotta have it 3rd down. On the sideline, he had 2 sideline catches, back shoulder balls that he caught. When the one was the play before the throw to DJ Moore to win the game against Green Bay. The other one was on the sideline too, on 4th down. Minnesota, it was the deep dig that he caught. And then there's another throw after that to set up the field goal to go to overtime. So in clutch situations, he came through. So anyways, I'm excited about what they have.
Well, and you mentioned some of those divisional opponents. I think the big one that's really worth mentioning is remember that horrible Thanksgiving Day loss to the Detroit Lions? I mean, Caleb actually targeted Rome on what I believe was the final throw of the game before or on the final drive. So it's one of those to where, we're certainly excited that the Bears have high investments in the receiver position. I mean, let's be honest. I was saying this thing last year, but I think it holds true to this year. The Bears traded for Keenan Allen in, I believe it was March of last year. DJ Moore obviously already on the roster, and then you add Rome Odunze. So what I said is, if you were to tell me 3, 4, 5 years ago that the 3rd best receiver on the Bears would have been a top 10 pick, I would have looked at you and I would have told you you're freaking crazy. What alternate, universe are you from? But now you look at it a year later, Keenan Allen's gone, which he's still a free agent, by the way, for the we need to re-sign Keenan Allen crowd, in case anyone is wondering. Now I look at this thing and I'm like, well, guess what? The 3rd best receiver on the Bears, the 2nd best receiver is a top 10 pick. The 3rd best receiver is a top 50 pick, or a top 40 pick, I should say. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, they've made the right investments where you've basically got 2 first rounders plus a very high 2nd round pick.
Well, and the reason that you can stack is because your quarterback's on a rookie contract. So it doesn't matter really how much that you spend there, or you spend at other positions, because you can afford it right now. So it's really nice. But I think this is a nice segue, you say, to look at the rest of the division. But now we're going to look at defense. So yesterday, y'all, it was offense. Today's going to be defense, and kind of seeing how they measure up, stack up against, Chicago if we wanted to. I kind of want to start with Minnesota, if you're cool with that one, man. Dude, Minnesota, y'all. Brian Flores, he's got the very, exotic scheme. They kind of fell off towards the end of last year, I felt like a little bit. And, man, they invested. So you look, they already had, Jonathan Grenard had a really good season. He did well against Kranamagaji, y'all, I know. But also Andrew Van Ginkel was a good signing. Blake Cashman was a good signing. They have, a bunch of the safeties, and they mix it up, and Harrison Smith is, 84 years old, and he's coming back for another year. But in the offseason, they beefed up Usayd. getting Jonathan Allen, who is the guy linked to the Bears a ton, trade for him, sign him, etc., and Javon Hargrave, who is a few years removed from a really high-end season with Philly. He fell down a little bit with the 49ers, been injured a little bit. Same with Jonathan Allen. But you had those two in front of those backers and Ivan Pace and these schemes of who's blitzing, who's not blitzing. And it makes Minnesota's defense, I think, pretty exciting.
It certainly does. And I will say this. So, slight correction here. We talked about the NFC North offenses. I believe it was 2 episodes ago, but it's somewhere from last week in your feeds if you guys want to check that out or check the episode out on our YouTube channel. I totally agree with you. I do think that in terms of just sheer continuity, Minnesota has it best. Now, the tough part about the Bears is that I do think, yes, the Bears are talented on paper, but continuity makes a big difference. And unfortunately for the Bears, I mean, this is a defense that, do they have some returning pieces? Yeah. But are they going to get off to as fast of a start as Minnesota? That is, I think, the $1 trillion question that everyone's going to have to kind of go ahead and answer at Halas Hall. I will also say this, that when I look at where Minnesota's defense is at, first of all, Jonathan Allen, I think a lot of people forget with him that he played on a Washington D line that included Montez Sweat and Chase Young and Deron Payne. So and Jonathan Allen himself was a first round pick. So you basically had 4 guys in the first round that were sort of on that D line. Now, was that a good D line? Yeah. But those were also some pretty bad Washington teams that Jonathan Allen was on. He still, despite being close to 30-ish years old, is on the good side of 30 for an interior pass rusher, and I think he's going to give the Bears interior some issues between both games in 2025.
Oh, 100% with you there. And that's the thing. I think that there a few teams, and that's a preview here, a few teams in the NFC North, I think that's their strategy, is that they're going to cause so much havoc up front that the back end isn't going to matter. And so that's something we have to talk about. If you want to beat Minnesota's defense, y'all, their secondary, suspect, okay? I joke about this, but Harrison Smith was a first-round pick in 2012. I mean, 13 years ago. He has lost multiple steps at this point. I like Josh Metellus. He's not bad. They did lose Cam Bynum in free agency. They brought Byron Murphy back. He's going to play nickel, maybe outside corner. They have Mekhi Blackman, a third-round pick from a couple years ago. That's their other starter. And they signed Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah, like as other corners. That's a bad corner room, y'all. Bad corner room. So what's funny, Usayd, is we just talked about the Bears receivers as being a strength. You go up against the Minnesota Vikings corners, and I see a mismatch. So as long as the front can protect for a little bit up there, you're going to have mismatches and potentially big plays, I think, against the secondary.
Which honestly is going to make things very exciting, because if the Bears are giving us any indication, it seems to be that they are ready to go in terms of being able to have mismatches. Well, the Vikings also have former Bears cornerback Reddy Stewart on the roster. You know, the guy that I guess everyone thought was going to be a really good sort of preseason player. Bears had found like a hidden gem. Travis Bell's also on there too. So it's definitely one of those situations to where we start to look at this whole thing and start to kind of say, okay, well, what can this team do? Which I know that before this season, we were talking, before the show, we were talking about some of the players that are going to these Big Ten SEC schools that I've had to go ahead and coach against. Another one that's on the roster is Bo Richter, the linebacker who played at one of the schools that I have the pleasure of coaching against every single year. So when I start to say like, oh yeah, I seriously have to coach, I feel like, against future NFL players every week, I certainly mean it. But moving on from Minnesota here, Detroit to me is perhaps, of the 4 teams in the division, the one that's got the most continuity is Minnesota. The one that I think is the most intriguing has to be the Detroit Lions. because they were everyone's pick for the Super Bowl a year ago when the regular season began. They lose Aiden Hutchinson week 4 or 5. Then there were rumors circulating, okay, if Hutchinson's back, then he's going to play in the Super Bowl if they go to the Super Bowl. That's something that obviously didn't happen. Now he's coming back for his 3rd season. It seems like with a vengeance, but there's questions across that entire unit because they lost Aaron Glenn, the guy that kind of made everything click. Yes, when we look at Dan Campbell, I mean, there's going to be, as long as I think he's there, they're going to be a pretty competitive team. Alex Anzalone's obviously coming back. Like, the Lions were so banged up last year. They've got, I think, the best interior with DJ Reader as well as Aleem McNeil. And then looking at guys like Raekwon Williams, but they added Tyleik Williams. So they're going to be a very damn good team up front, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I think if you look at the division of the other 3 teams, I think Detroit's the most balanced defense because their Achilles heel the past few years has been corner. And, they invested in Terrion Arnold. They just signed DJ Reed to be opposite him, which is a nice pickup. Brian Branch, obviously, is a stud. Kirby Joseph from Illinois. He had like 8 or 9 picks last year, I think almost led the NFL. But then they also brought in Rocky Sin, Avonte Maddox to kind of beef that up. And so, you talked about the defensive front. They still need an end outside opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, they brought back Marvis Davenport. We'll see how that goes. They have Chicago Bears legend Al-Qaid Muhammad as a backup at the end over there. But they need the end help. But their interior D-tackle room is better. Jack Campbell took another step last year. Like, they have, I think, the most balanced defense. But as you said, how are they going to go with a new defensive coordinator? Because as we know, teams that lose both coordinators tend to fall off. The Eagles did after they went to the Super Bowl. They fell off. And so them losing a DC, I think, is bigger news here than people are kind of giving them credit for. Because I think a lot of the attention is on them losing Ben Johnson.
And I certainly agree with that because to me, Ben Johnson has been the best head coach candidate, as you mentioned, for 2 to 3 cycles. The other big thing with the Lions is this. You talk about a balanced defense. Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw Jr., the 2 corners there, those guys are going into their 2nd season. So there's a lot of expectations there for those guys to continue taking the next step. And again, in what is basically at the end of the day, a 4-man front with 5 defensive backs, you are hoping that Ennis Rakestraw Jr., Terrion Arnold, they take another step forward, which makes Brian Branch's life on the back end so much easier, along with Kirby Joseph. Because the one thing with the Lions is that they, to me, in terms of the secondary alone, they have the best secondary in the division. And the reason being is because with that secondary, when you have 2 good safeties like Kirby Joseph as well as Brian Branch, you are able to run any sort of coverage you want to. You can have no safeties on the field if you choose to. You can go 1 high or you can go 2 high. Obviously, I think the big thing, just to get into the scheme here, safeties. So with coverages, right? Coverages are very dependent on safeties, believe it or not. And the reason being is because if you got 1 safety, that either means you're going a cover 1 look or you're going a true cover 3 look. If you've got 2 safeties, you're most likely going to go with a cover 2 look. But then you can kind of mix and match it to where the really good teams will have man coverage on one side, maybe they've got zone on the other side, depending on what the offense is showing, or they will show a true cover 2 look, then all of a sudden rotate into a 1 high, which the Lions are certainly capable of doing. And the reason being is because when you got a linebacker, you got a safety playing a linebacker in Brian Branch, you can start off with a 2 high, rotate into a 1 high, but then if you really wanted to, drop back into quarters if you chose to do so, or just play your strict man-to-man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could go inverted too. I mean, because Branch can play nickel. I mean, they also have DJ Reed, so I don't know how they're going to put all those guys out there. But like, if they're interchangeable, you can't guess what the coverage is. Guys can fall back and come up and play robber all the time. So I think that they could have a lot of fun there. I do think they're 1 edge away from being a very dominant defense. Because also you don't know how Aiden Hutchinson is going to play coming back. I hope it's good because I like him as a player. I think he's a good player. You had mentioned this before about, the Washington defense had those 4 first-round picks, right? Well, now we have to look at Green Bay because, man, all we've heard for how long is how many first-round picks are on this defense, right? You look at their front, right? Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, all first-round picks. Quay Walker is behind them, first-round pick. Jair Alexander, whether he's going to play there or not is a debate. First-round pick. So they have a lot of first-round picks there. The thing with Green Bay, y'all, is they didn't really invest a ton in that defensive front because they didn't get pressure last year. They're trying to do a lot more pressure packages with their new coordinator last year. But so really they're hoping Lucas Van Ness develops. They're hoping Rashawn Gary gets more snaps. They're hoping Kenny Clark can fight off the age curve. Devontae Wyatt takes a step. So like these are all things I think that they're hoping happens naturally from development, but they didn't see a good enough pass rush last year, to me, I think, to sustain what their secondary really is.
Yeah, when we had the NFC North offenses part of the show a couple of days ago, I kind of said that Green Bay to me, and I'm going to repeat this here, I'm not saying this is a guy that covers the Bears. I'm not saying this is a guy that's been a Bears fan pretty much my whole life. Green Bay to me is the most underperforming team in the whole division. I would even argue across the league for how good they've been, but then they also end up being disappointing when it gets to a certain point. Now, part of it is also this, though. I'm just going to put this out there. Say what y'all want about Jordan Love, but if we're being fully honest, they've made it work with Jordan Love. Getting back to the defense here, in the context of what's good for them. Getting back to the defense here, the big thing to keep in mind is that the Packers, to me, are a classic example of just because you have talent at a position, if you don't have the right coaches in place to consistently draft and develop, then you are not going to be a successful team ultimately, or you're not going to get a return on your investment. Because that's what they've done, right? They've invested 4 to 5 first-round picks in the defensive line. And has it been good? Yes. But I always think that when the Packers are going up against better offensive lines, such as the Eagles or Chiefs, for example, especially that playoff game against the Eagles, that front four stalled to a point where I'm like, are we watching the same Green Bay Packers team that we've been seeing all season?
Yeah, and it wasn't very close either. I know the score looked closer, but remember Saquon Barkley fell down, or else that was another touchdown tacked on top of that. Yeah, they need Lucas Van Ness to take a step. I mean, Lucas Van Ness, y'all, was like the 12th pick, I think, and they need him to do something this year. It's year 3 for him. I think to really make that happen. I think Rashawn Gary is a good player. He's not the same player he was before his ACL. Similarly to Elgin Jenkins. They picked up Devontae Wyatt's 5th-year option, so he's there for 2 more years. They did not pick up the 5th-year option for Quay Walker. I do like Edgerrin Cooper, a linebacker that I think he definitely showed that he could play in this league. If he takes a step, he could be a really good player. And honestly, they have one of the best safeties in the league. I think Xavier McKinney is a really good player. He did get juked out by DeAndre Swift on the sideline for that touchdown. But in terms of ball hawking, he gets a lot of picks. He did really well there. They need to see what else happens there. Like, there's rumors Jair Alexander and them, they're kind of mending the relationship, because from what I heard, Jair wants a fresh start and Green Bay wanted a fresh start. But now it seems like they're trying to come together, because I don't know if Jair doesn't have a market or whatever happened. But without him, Usayd, that's secondary. I said Xavier McKinney, like him a lot. There's Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon. They signed Nate Hobbs, who I think they overpaid for. He's okay. Evan Williams had a couple good games, then fell off as a rookie. Javon Bullard, 2nd-round pick out of Georgia, didn't play that great. They really, as a secondary, they've got one dude and a couple of and then also like some potential bad. So when we look at what Minnesota is, defense, win with the defensive front, hope that you don't have time to throw behind him. I think Green Bay is kind of in a similar boat, except for Green Bay's got one good guy back there. So you just watch where is McKinney, and then you throw opposite him. But Minnesota's front's better than Green Bay's front. So to me, I think they're two similar teams trying to do something the same, but they're just putting, honestly, very average to below average guys at corner, both teams, and praying that the defensive front gets there.
And okay, so to me, that's an issue because you can't be, when you're a team such as the Eagles, for example, you have these waves of pass rushers to the point where your front four is so good that you can plug in anyone and it doesn't matter who it is, like they can get after the quarterback. That's when you can afford to have a secondary that is slightly mediocre. That is when you can afford it. But when you are a team like a Green Bay or Minnesota, Minnesota does have some waves of those pass rushers, but at some point, the glass is going to start to crack. Green Bay doesn't have that. Green Bay doesn't necessarily have the waves of the pass rushers that they feel like they need to go ahead and stop some of these high-flying offenses. I mean, you mentioned all these names. We didn't even talk about Eric Stokes, who, again, was a first-round pick, is now with the Raiders. First-round pick by the Packers, now with the Raiders. This is really one of those situations to where I'm not going to say I was surprised that they went ahead and they drafted Matt Golden in the first round. But if you look at it, they didn't take a cornerback till the 7th round. I also sort of look at this whole thing and I'm like, wow, it's kind of surprising how when we look at the way that the draft kind of shook out and what was expected, I for sure thought that they probably would have gone with a guy like a Will Johnson. But obviously that's not something that, ended up happening simply because, again, they wanted to finally break the 2-decade-old trend and take a receiver.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I pulled this up, and I know some people are very indifferent about PFF, but I like them as a neutral party, right? So this is their defensive front in terms of ranking by position. They have Rashawn Gary's the 28th best edge, which he's paid as like a top 10 edge right now for sure. Devontae Wyatt finished 37th among D tackles. Rashawn Gary was 53rd. And then the other starter, Lucas Van Ness, y'all, was 107th out of 119 DNs. It's bad on the other side. We're talking about Detroit needs a guy on the other side. Lucas Van Ness is on the other side, but he's already been 2 years in the NFL and he's shown very little. And so if you're not showing enough there, and then you go to the secondary here, y'all, I mean, they've got a couple guys. Valentine was 54th corner. Javon Bowler played some nickel, was 80th. Keyshawn Nix is 63rd. I mean, how are you going to hold up there? I think that's going to be really, really important. And again, in future episodes, we're going to bring in some other NFC North, other beat writers. We talked about that. So be aware for that one to come up. We'll talk about this stuff and what they think is going to happen, because I think it's going to be some good conversation.
It certainly is going to be very interesting here. Speaking of the Packers, man, I think it's time to start talking about the schedule here as we start to go ahead and get into the final phase of this episode. So the Bears, obviously, we know that they are playing in 2 confirmed games so far. So it's week 13, November 28th. They're playing a Black Friday game at Philadelphia. And then week 16, the time's to be determined, but it is December 20th. It's a Saturday night game. They are hosting the Packers at Soldier Field in what is going to be a primetime game. So it seems to be the first time in forever, it seems like, that Bears-Packers is on in prime time. The last one that I remember at Soldier Field was to open up the 2019 season, which that watch party at Grant Park was not very fun because the Bears ended up losing. But I have to say this. Some people are looking at the Bears and saying 6 to 10 wins. I tend to go back and forth on that. It's a league of parity. Worst to first can certainly happen in a year. And let's call it how it is. As much as people are going to sit there and say, oh, they're playing the Ravens and they're playing the Bengals, they're playing the Commanders, you don't know what you're going to get out of 99.9% of these teams. And some of the teams that they're playing have undergone significant changes throughout the offseason. Pittsburgh, the Raiders, the Browns even. So it's wide open to me.
Well, and I think part of it too is that, I mean, the Bears were supposed to have one of the easiest schedules last year, and then it turned out to be one of the hardest because we don't know what's going to happen. So the one thing that I'm looking forward to with the schedule, and something that I think is important, is rest. I want to know how rested the Bears are versus their opponents. Like, will they have more? When you have more rest, generally, it increases your percentage to win. I think it's almost like 55%. So it's something that is significant in terms of, you think of these small little edges between teams. So like, playing at Philly on Black Friday, so it'll be a short week. But what is the game the Bears are going to have before that, right? Is it going to be noon? Is it going to be afternoon, night? Like, I think that's important. Is it a Thursday night game the week before? So the Bears are two, Thursday then a Friday game. That's better. They'll have more rest. So I think about that one. Also, I've heard rumors of they play Green Bay, as you talked about, week 16 on a Saturday. Well, they would have more rest to potentially play Christmas Day the next week. You know what I mean? So I don't know how it all will kind of pan out, or how they'll do things, but we'll see. It'll be exciting. But the Bears have 8 home games, 9 away games. That makes it more difficult, Usayd, versus some other teams. Like, I think Minnesota has 8 home games and only 7 away games, and they have like 2 international games or something like that. So like, they have an advantage, right? They have less road games versus, a neutral site in international games. So all those little things matter. So those are the things I'm going to look for tomorrow.
Well, I'm looking at some of these matchups, right? So let's just kind of run through the teams they're playing here. So you've got obviously your 6 division games: Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota. We've discussed those teams plenty, so don't need to really get into those. Then you start to look at the NFC East. Okay, you got Dallas, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Commanders. Now, here's the big thing, okay? So I fully believe, and this isn't me making any predictions, but there's a legit chance the Bears walk out of that division at least 3-1 or 4-0, depending on when the games are. The Giants, we know they are rebuilding, so they've been rebuilding for forever, quite frankly. Yeah, they got Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, plus Russell Wilson there. Whenever that game is, that the head coach, Brian Dable, if it's a game later in the season, maybe Jackson Dart is starting. And all of a sudden, you're going to take this Bears Dennis Allen-led defense against a rookie quarterback. I would definitely say so, yes. I'm also going to go out on a limb and say this, that historically, when the Bears have played the Giants at Soldier Field, the Bears have always kind of been the ones that are victorious, right? So the history's on the Bears side. You look at Dallas this game, well, when Dallas has come to Soldier Field, it's usually been a late season primetime game. The Bears have ended up winning that as well, okay? The Bears have always struggled going to Lincoln Financial Field, but I do think that this year the big thing is that there's going to be a Super Bowl hangover for the Eagles, all right? And then Washington, you look at, they're the biggest wild card on the schedule to me. And why specifically? Because what if the league finally catches up to Jaden Daniels? What if the league adjusts to Jaden Daniels? There were some people on Bears Twitter, I should mention, that said Jaden Daniels that they didn't want the Bears to take Jaden Daniels back in 2024 because Jaden Daniels was the next coming of Justin Fields, which was, quite frankly, some of the dumbest stuff on the planet I ever read, simply because Jaden and Justin, while their body types are very similar in a sense, Justin is more closer to a Cam Newton. Jaden is more closer to a Lamar Jackson. So the fact that both of these guys could run suddenly made them, Jaden Daniels, the next coming of Justin Fields. I just thought it was the stupidest thing on the planet. But Jaden, I think, is a better pocket passer. But I also believe that the league is going to catch up to the Commanders at some point. And I think it's going to be this year because all these teams got a year tape on Jaden Daniels, which there's always that question of when a quarterback does well the rookie year and then they're going into sophomore year, are they going to have that sophomore slump per se, which is usually because teams adjust and catch up.
You mean like CJ Stroud just had?
Yeah, that one. I mean, yes. Yeah,
I mean, and it happens. Like the more data that you get, the tougher it is. I mean, Jordan Love had a very good, end of 2023, 2024. It fell off a little bit. Like that definitely happens. I do think there's validity to the Fields Jaden Daniels thing, by the way. And to me, it was a couple things. One, it was Jaden Daniels had a very high scramble rate. So when he saw pressure, then he ran in college versus staying in there, which he did differently in the NFL. And part of this too is like guys can develop, like they can develop their game. And certainly he did that one. And the other one too is he didn't throw over the middle of the field a lot in college. He threw a lot of outside fades, and that's what Justin does too. So, but I did hear, you talk about that division. I did hear, again, rumors that we go off of that at Washington could be a primetime game. But I agree with you. I think that division isn't something that scares me a ton. You talked about the Super Bowl hangover for the Eagles. The other one is Saquon Barkley. I love the player, man. I think he's a good guy. He had so many touches, Usayd, last year, over 400 when you include all of the playoff games. That generally does not bode well for the next year for a running back. And so, you start looking at like pieces on that team, you start taking away little things like how are they going to be? And it's tough to be motivated. Like, hey, we won the whole thing. We don't see a ton of repeats. I know Kansas City, they're a different animal, right? But the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. It took them a couple years to even get back again, right? The Rams won a Super Bowl. How they do after that? Oh boy, now it's down. Now we have to like rebuild a bit. So to me, I think there is a bit of a hangover there, and you're talking about like the other ones. What's going to be interesting is we played the AFC North as well. Pittsburgh doesn't have a quarterback right now, unless you call Mason Rudolph a quarterback. Cleveland's bad. That's going to be something. You talked about Baltimore and Cincinnati, but those are going to be interesting too because they're on the road, but the Bears typically do well against AFC opponents, whether it's on the road or at home. So I know those are really good programs, but again, we don't know what happens. Does Derrick Henry, does he sustain? Does he take a step back? So there's lots of things I think to consider. Joe Burrow has been fairly injured in his career, unfortunately, and I hate injuries, y'all, but like things can happen. So I'm not ruling the Bears out from having a really good season, and mainly it's for one reason: Ben Johnson. And I think that changes a lot, and people aren't harnessing that right now.
I totally agree with you there.
Absorbing that.
Yeah, having a damn good head coach is certainly a game changer in any sport. I'm also going to go out and mention this. The last time the Bears were in Cincinnati playing was in a road game in Cincinnati was 2017, I believe, when I think that was the game that Jordan Howard went off for like 2 touchdowns, and we're like, let's go, the Bears. That was one of, I think, like their 4 or 5 wins that season.
The one I remember before that one you said is when Cedric Benson got his revenge on the Bears. Remember that game?
Yes, I do remember that one.
R.I.P. Benson. I liked Benson, but
that was the one I think that was 2009 or 10, where that defense was so deflated on the sideline, and they were like, "Are you kidding us? Like, what the hell did the Bengals do?" So
wasn't that like the year? Was it Ty Montgomery, the wide receiver that played running back for the Packers, ran for like 100-some yards on the Bears too? The Bears defense was really bad that year.
No, this was Ty Montgomery was like the Mark Trustman, John Fox era. That's what it was.
A little later.
This 09 matchup was the one when Lovie Smith was the head coach, which hopefully Ben Johnson's here to break the curse of Lovie Smith. But the other last game to talk about here is this. The Raiders game, which is going to be in Las Vegas. So first off, I fully believe that this is going to be the game where one of two things happens, all right? Ashton Genty either comes out and runs for 250 yards on the Bears, which I'm going to knock on wood and say that hopefully it doesn't happen. So there's me knocking on wood. I don't know if you guys can hear it. The other big thing I think is this, though, is that it could also be the game where everyone just like, wow, man. I mean, maybe we were all overreacting to the Bears absolutely needing to take Ashton Genty because the Dennis Allen's defense just shut him down, which this is one of those games I fully expect to be a early season matchup. I could totally see this being one of the first Thursday night games of the year. Yeah.
I think it would be. Well, the other thing is that because like, remember the Jets last year, they had all these primetime games and then they didn't end up happening and being like, who they thought they were going to be for like entertainment ratings. The NFL is going to be strategic with like some of these teams that aren't going to be good. They're going to want to get those early in the year because later on you think Philly or some, Baltimore, they're probably going to still be fairly decent. So I agree with you there. I think that's a good bet for like week 2 Thursday night game.
And there's 2 games we forgot to talk about. New Orleans, rookie quarterback and Tyler Show starting. And then San Francisco's obviously with Brock Purdy, which is going to be a road game, which I understand whenever the Bears travel to Santa Clara, it's time's never necessarily on their side. And that matchup always goes in favor of whichever team is better at that point in time. But what is worth noting there is the fact that the 49ers are going through a bit of a transition themselves. Yes, they're still going to have Nick Bosa and some of the guys on that defensive line. They're still going to have Hufanga, the safety, but they were disappointing last year, which means that they're going into this retooling mode, which means they are going to be a team that's going to take time to really gel.
Yeah, I just double checked because I like him. Yeah, Hufanga left. I think he went to Denver, is my guess. Yeah, he's not even there, who I like a lot. They're going to go with Malik Mustafa, who I did like out of, I think, Wake Forest. But I agree with you. You know, one advantage the Bears do have just in general is because they are centrally located, they travel less than most teams, y'all. So I looked at the thing in terms of like total mileage. Obviously, like East Coast, West Coast teams have to travel the most in terms of mileage, which I think equates to rest, which actually can help the Bears a little bit too. So again, all these small little things are things that we're looking for to give them an edge, to have a little bit more energy, to be one step ahead, to win games.
Using my geography background, right? You look at it, the farthest south that the Bears are going this year is going to be New Orleans. Okay. I mean, the farthest north that they're going to be going would pretty much be Green Bay and Minnesota. And then you look at the farthest east that they're going, and it's going to be Washington to play the Commanders, so Maryland basically. And then the farthest west that they're going is going to be San Francisco to play the 49ers. So it's overall a very, compact schedule for the most part. And some of these teams that they're going to be playing, I mean, I do really think that a team such as Dallas is going to come in here mid-season specifically for the ratings. That could certainly be a late November, early December type of game.
Yeah, well, the more we talk about it, the more I'm actually getting excited about the schedule, Usayd. So look at this. You're changing me around. So I'm thinking of like when they could play them and how it can matter. One thing, y'all, before we wrap up here, remember that we're at the end of the month here, we're going to do a Q&A episode. So make sure you guys are submitting questions. We're not getting a ton yet. So make sure you're getting some of those into us. Anything that we're not covering, things that you want us to look for in future episodes too, make sure you comment on YouTube, or you can just message or DM Usayd or myself.
You can absolutely do that. Tomorrow night, Zach Pearson and Steven Johnson are going to have a schedule reaction episode. They should be live streaming it, so keep it locked into the Bear Report YouTube channel to check that thing out. They're going to be breaking down the picks as the schedule drops and all that. That's going to be a really fun episode. Before we get out of here, guys, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for the support. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe on the video. Leave a thumbs up. We want to obviously keep you guys coming back. In the comments, leave some things regarding the Bears or the NFC North in general that you want us talking about, because we love to kind of make this show your own, and we want to address not just the things that Nick and I text back and forth about, but the things that you guys want to hear as well. Do the same on the Bear Report website. Come join the community. It's a really great community there. You can sign up for a free or paid subscription. Lots of really good insider tidbits that Zach and I post as well. Check us out on Twitter at HalasBeat, @ Nick Whalen, @ Usayd Koshul. I'm out of town the rest of the week, so we're not going to have a episode until next Tuesday, which is going to be about 5 or 6 days from now. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the schedule release if you're into that type of stuff. I gotta get out of here because I got waiting room. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. I gotta be up at 5 a.m. So bear down, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you guys next time.